Hi, my name is Bram Borison, and I will be presenting the side of science today. So maybe our world doesn't have angels. Maybe it doesn't have reincarnation. Maybe you will never be reborn in heaven. But still, given just what modern science has found about our universe, it is an amazing and vast universe. That is the good news first I'd like to share with you. So what is science? What is this field that I'm speaking for? Today we've got representatives from religion and the New Age approach. Science is all based on experiment. If it doesn't pass experiment, we don't accept it as science. So in religion, you can have a personal revelation, you can have a mystical experience, and that happens internally. But you're not always able to convince everyone else of it. After all, history is littered with religious wars, people fighting over whose revelation took precedence. So we don't get that in science. In 1920, there was a big debate. Are there other galaxies, or is the Milky Way the only galaxy? And people took sides. One person said we were the only galaxy and he was wrong. And the evidence came in to show that he was wrong. He was right in saying that our galaxy was larger than the opposite side thought. But eventually they settled it without fighting, just through the acceptance of the evidence of experiment. So when it comes to a lot of big issues today, I'm going to take the side of an agnostic. It was a scientist who came up with that term. By that I just mean that I will not take sides, that there might be evidence yet to come in. So science has a lot of authority. It's sort of deserved that authority. For example, we've landed people on the moon. No religion or New Age approach has ever done that. So we deserve that authority, but we have to be careful not to abuse it and say, hey, this guy's New Age theory is right because of science, if we can't actually make that link 100%. Imagine that you had always lived in Atlanta your entire life. You had never left home, and nobody you knew had ever left Atlanta either. You'd have a very limited conception of reality. And one day you travel to the opposite side of the world and you find, actually, when it's midnight there, it's noon here, and that would blow your mind. You'd say to people back home, and they'd think your language was even messed up. Midnight, noon, how can they be at the same time? So a lot of things that we get wrong in life are because of our limited experience. None of us here have traveled near the speed of light. None of us have fallen into a black hole, and I really hope nobody ever does here, because given the size of most black holes, it would be a really bad way to go. Okay? So falling into a black hole you haven't experienced, and if you did, you would find that space and time have to be described as if they're curved and wrapped together somehow. And that's beyond our everyday experience. Motion of the speed of light is also at the size of an atom. For those of you who just saw the Captain America movie, yeah, there's this guy Ant-Man who squeezes down to a small size, and if he became Atom Man, he would find the laws of nature are very different. It's like going to the other side of the earth and finding midnight is noon. So that is where you enter the world of quantum mechanics. And I have to offer a few cautions and some encouragement too. We have spiritual seekers here, and quantum mechanics is in many ways mystical. Just like a person who returned from the opposite side of the world and said, hey, noon is midnight on the other side of the world. It's that same sort of mysticism, trying to talk about experiences that are beyond everyday experiences. But we have to be careful too. For example, in the theory of quantum mechanics, we often say that perception influences reality. And that's come back in the New Age movement in many different ways. The principles of quantum mechanics are linked to everything from the law of attraction to astrology. We have to be careful about just what science has the authority to endorse. So yes, perception influences reality, but do not go into busy traffic blindfolded. Just because you will not perceive the traffic doesn't mean that it's not real. So quantum mechanics, if it applies anywhere, it applies where it was discovered. So when you try to imagine these principles of quantum mechanics as they're filtered through to the mass media, try to imagine that you were confronted with those original experiments. Here's a guy, or maybe it's a woman, Madame Curie, doing an experiment. Say you have a beam of silver atoms and you have a magnetic field that splits that beam up into two beams. And then you have different magnetic fields at different angles. Or you have a beam of light of different colors, different intensities, and it shines on a metal. And electricity will flow out of that metal. A current will flow. What colors make that current flow? That was a basic experiment convincing people of quantum mechanics. Another basic experiment was where you had a beam of electricity, an electron beam, come onto a crystal of nickel, and the electrons bounced back in different directions. So all these experiments were explained using math that was, you have to use unfamiliar language to talk about unfamiliar experiences. Usually A times B is B times A. Not so in the math of quantum mechanics. Just like the order in which you observe things matters too, because your observations will change the thing that you're looking at. So it uses the square root of -1, an imaginary number. Now imagine people doing all these experiments and doing all this math, and you look over their shoulder and you say, hey, perception influences reality. They're not necessarily going to say, hey, thanks, you gave me that breakthrough I needed to understand quantum mechanics. None of the ancient mystics, none of the great Buddhist philosophers came up with quantum mechanics. They might have developed logical systems that are useful in understanding quantum mechanics, but there's much in quantum mechanics that is also unfamiliar to us. And as we grow spiritually, there is a lot inside us. They say the kingdom of God is within us. And so yes, every single atom in your body is obeying the laws of quantum mechanics. And yet we grow by having experiences that stress us a little bit, that cause us to change, to adapt to the unfamiliar. And so if you're truly to grow spiritually by encountering quantum mechanics, you can't just incorporate it in your pre-existing knowledge. You have to stretch your mind to understand what it's talking about. Another thing I want to caution everyone about is something that not just scientists but also theologians think is kind of a bad idea, and this is called the God of the gaps, where there's this one area that science has not yet explained. It's really hard right now for science to explain. And people say, okay, beyond that boundary, that's the realm of religion. That's where God is. And this is a bad idea because science being based on experiment, next week we do the experiment and now we understand this mystery. So what happened before the Big Bang? If people are interested, I'll talk about some cutting edge speculations. Maybe science will answer that someday. So don't base your spiritual orientation either for or against some scientific idea. That idea can change, and you need to understand that idea in its fullness, to be honest, or else you're using that authority to support an idea that you support actually for other reasons. Now, what do I consider the great mysteries of our universe, and what do I consider from my study of science to be things that are spiritually enlightening about what we have already discovered? Well, the process itself I find spiritually enlightening. The process of science being open to new experiences and open to revision of our deeply held beliefs. But not everyone knows that we are in search of what we call a theory of everything, but we do not yet have one, a TOE, theory of everything. We have a theory of things that are very small, quantum mechanics, and we have a theory of gravity, Einstein's general theory of relativity. but nobody has yet successfully combined them into one working theory. Another thing that I find really mysterious is that our universe seems to obey mathematical laws. And in quantum mechanics, they take the form of laws of chance. There is only a certain probability that we can calculate. We can't calculate exactly what can happen, but we can calculate exactly that probability of different things happening. So why? Why should our world be a mathematical world? You could say, well, God did that. Why did God do it that way? And it's a really kind of split personality there that would, if you do attribute this to a spirit like God, a really split personality that says, okay, let's follow this law exactly, this mathematical law, but only use it to find the chances and not just roll the die to find the result. So it's really mysterious to me why our universe is mathematical. And a lot of spiritual seekers might say, oh, I hated math class in high school. I'm looking for something in the universe that reflects my spiritual yearnings. It doesn't mesh with me that our universe is a mathematical one. But I want to caution you on 2 points. One is that there's that growth idea that we have to encounter in the world things that are also kind of foreign to us. And also that math itself can be a deeply mystical way of viewing the world. In fact, the number 0, which the ancient Greeks and Romans didn't have. That came out of India, which already had this great mystical tradition, several mystical traditions, including Buddhism and its concept of everything arising from emptiness. So that for me is a great big mystery. Why is our world so mathematical? And it appears to be. Another lesson I would take from the science that I've learned is the Copernican principle, which is that we are not the center of everything. We are the center of our own worlds, the center of our own perception. But the way it appears right now is that there is something beyond us, vastly beyond us, and we are only a part of that. And we are not the central actors of the drama of everything. We are the central actors of the drama of our own lives. But just like Copernicus said, the Earth was not the center of everything. Earth goes around the sun. Human beings are not necessarily the whole point of the animal kingdom. Some religions might be thought of as saying that. But what I've learned from science is that our universe is vast, contains a variety. There might very well be extraterrestrials, and many religions will have to cope with that. In fact, I would say that variety is the underlying principle as far as I've found any in the way that our universe works. One way to look at quantum mechanics, the underlying law, is to say that everything that can possibly happen does. But for some reason, some possibilities will cancel each other out, like waves colliding. And we don't know all the details. But to me, that sort of represents the sort of fundamental principle that I can get behind. Philosopher Leibniz, deep philosopher. Philosophy means love of wisdom. It doesn't mean you have wisdom, but that you aspire to it. It implies an openness to learning. He said, there's this principle of sufficient reason. He believed in a God who would never just choose this thing. Why not? And to me, if the universe actually chooses everything, that solves this problem. And that's one way of looking at quantum mechanics, that it spreads into every possibility. This is sometimes called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Even in this area, mind and world are combined in that our minds travel along part of our multiverse, and by which path we travel, that is what we experience. So at this point, I'll be open to questions.